Good morning and happy Sunday to you all. Welcome any guests that are with us. I'm glad you can be with us at Holy Family Cathedral this morning. Special welcome home to our pilgrims who are on the Three Hearts pilgrimage this weekend. I was able to join them on Friday where we walked 24 miles that day, but then I had to leave them at that point. They still then had to walk another 12 miles on Saturday. So if you're seeing anybody who seems to be standing a little more stiffer or using the pew in front of them to support themselves, that's probably why. They just got done from about 36 miles walking in 2 days. So as you are kneeling comfortably during the Eucharistic prayer, say a prayer for them. It is probably a little bit painful for them right now. As we encounter these gospel reading today, the question that comes to mind for all of us is, what are you most afraid to hear from God? What are you most afraid to hear God speak to you? There could be many things that we could be afraid of hearing God speak to us. Could be the words that he simply says to us of, I love you. It could be him saying to us, come and follow me, such as we hear that invitation given to St. Peter to come and to follow me. Could be the saying, him saying to us, go and to sin no more. Essentially what we hear every time that we're going to the sacrament of reconciliation, to go and to sin no more. We could keep going on with this list, but brothers and sisters, there's something within all of us that is fearful to hear something spoken to us from God. All of these fears could come down to a commonality that every single one of us has a perceived loss of control in whatever this fear is. There's a perception that we're losing control in that what God is saying to us. In those words that he can speak to us in I love you, there's an invitation that comes from that to a response, to love him in return. When he gives those words to us to come and to follow him, it's an invitation to us to give up house, to give up brother or sisters or mother or father or children or land, such as we hear in this gospel today. Even in that response, that words spoken to us to go and to sin no more, it's a very invitation to us to change the way of our operating, changing the way that we normally do things. We can even see it in this man that's coming to Jesus in the gospel. As he runs up to Jesus, as he kneels in front of him, he asks him, Lord, what do I need to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? As the conversation goes on, Jesus gives him an invitation, gives him the invitation to go and to sell everything and to give it to the poor. And we hear that this man walks away sadly. There's a fear that's coming on in this gentleman because of these words spoken to Jesus as he's walking away sadly. If we were to speculate about this man, we could probably speculate that he has built up his identity on this material wealth that he has, that Christ is inviting him to go and to sell, and that he is creating this false sense of security, that his self-worth, that his dignity, that his identity is being wrapped up in these material goods. Jesus asking him to go and to sell everything is becoming a perceived loss of this very man's identity because he has to go and to give this thing up. It's a perceived loss of control. It's natural for our bodies to fight back in these sorts of incidences when we are perceiving to lose control, especially when it comes to our very identity. Just for an example, give the example of when we have the good intentions of changing our ways through dieting. Say we're going to eat less carbs than we normally do. What's the very thing that becomes most desirous to us? Those carbs, those things that we give up, that we're trying to avoid. Our body is reacting to it because it's loved it so much and now it's losing control because it no longer has it. Also go to another example. Take a kid who is told by some adults what to do. then the kid's reaction can be rebellion, can be rebellious. To give a little more concrete example of that, say to an adult says to a kid, don't touch that stove. Subconsciously, that kid could have this reaction in their minds, saying to themselves, you can't tell me what to do. You do not have control over me. I have control over what I do. Therefore, you can't tell me what I can do. And so what do? They touch the stove. Brothers and sisters, the ability for us to have choice, to have control over what we choose, is very dignifying to us. As what makes us unique as human beings is for us to have an intellect, is for us to have free will. And in that free will, having the ability to choose. Is that why it's become so dignifying to us to choose? Hence why you see kids rebellious when they are commanded what to do by an adult. But also taking an example of a kid who does what's asked of them without rebellion, without hesitation. They go and do it right away. Okay, what's different in this sort of scenario with a kid that does it? I dare say is that there is a level of trust that is in that relationship with that adult. That they trust this adult has their best interest in mind, and so the kid still willingly chooses. They still willingly choose to do what is asked of them. It's not any slight against their dignity, but they still willingly choose it because the dignity that they have. They don't have any perceived loss in that dignity as a kid. Hence why they still willingly do it, because of that trust that is established there. Again, brothers and sisters, what are you most afraid to hear from God? Where do you lack trust in your discipleship? There's a beautiful prayer that's given to the church. It's the Litany of Trust. I imagine many of you know this prayer. Many of you have prayed it yourselves. For those who don't know this beautiful prayer, I encourage you to go to look it up. If you Google Litany of Trust, it's going to be one of the first things that appears to you. But it is a beautiful litany that helps us identify and just maybe what areas that we may be lacking in that trust. If you read through the Litany of Trust, if you pray through it, not just read, but pray through it, there's probably going to be something in there that stirs your heart. Well, that stirring of your heart is worth looking at. That stirring of that heart could be pointing to a lack of trust that you are identifying in your life, a lack of trust to our Lord. Just to give you an example, particularly with this question, what are you most afraid to hear from God? There's the line in the Litany of the Trust that says to us, from all suspicion of your words and promises, deliver me, Jesus. From all suspicion of your words and promises, deliver me, Jesus. These prayers work. Those who dedicate themselves to these prayers, not just to pray it once, but to continuously pray it through a period of time, have found very much fruit that comes forth from it. Because what they are doing is, as they recognize that stirring in their hearts, they will sit with it. They're inviting the Lord into it by saying, deliver me, Jesus. They are deliberately opening up their heart and letting our Lord to come and to heal whatever that area is that is lacking trust. These prayers work, brothers and sisters. The only way that we can grow in trust for anything is to spend time with that thing, is to spend time with that person. Any of our married couples can attest to that here. That trust that they have in their relationship is built because they have spent time with each other. That trust was established even before they got married because of the time they spent dating, and to build that trust in each other that then led them to their marriage. So how do we ever expect to grow in trust with our Lord if we're not willing to spend time with Him? If we're not willing to spend time in prayer with Him, to allow Him to come into those areas, to open our hearts, to rend them open, and to cast out any suspicion of his words within us, to cast out any suspicions of his promises, and to be delivered from them. Brothers and sisters, I challenge all of us to pray this litany of trust, not just once, but to pray it daily. We can arrive at this beautiful line that is within the Litany of Trust that says, "From the fear that trusting you will leave me more destitute." From the fear that trusting you will leave me more destitute. Deliver us, Jesus.